Oh, welcome everyone. It's fantastic to be here. Today, I'm going to be talking about tech leadership and dealing with that thing that we don't get very often in tech. It's called change. I've been working in tech leadership in various different roles. Head of engineering, director of engineering, working for fintechs, SaaS products, startups, and scale-ups, of course, and now I'm working in enterprise, which is a whole new world of learning for me. I have worked predominantly in the quality space. I feel very privileged to have worked in the quality space. It's given me an opportunity to look at both and explore the business value and the technical implications, the technical risks that exist in our systems. And because, quality is everyone's responsibility, I look at discovery, I work with product owners, I look in the delivery space, the operations space, and even onto support. So I really get to see the whole life cycle of how things work, and I love that about my role. So like I said in the abstract, anyone who thinks that a change is as good as a holiday clearly does not work in tech. Or at least if you do work in tech and you think that, can you come and tell me? Because I want to know what your secret sauce is. Technology has been amazing. I feel incredibly privileged to be an engineer in this time. I've seen so many different changes over my career. And I've seen, but along with that has come the complexity of systems. And we've looked at even, from CI/CD in the early days to also cloud computing. And I keep thinking, these are just websites. Why has everything become so complicated? Fortunately, there's some really smart people doing some work in this space. And if you're here tomorrow, I urge you to go and check out the talks around lo-fi, local first software. There's a few people giving that. Brooklyn Zelenka, she does an amazing talk in that space. Erica Pisani, so I just want to make sure I got the names right. Loved her talk, yes, when I was in Sydney. And Katie Bell does one on WebAssembly. So if you get a chance to see any of those talks, go ahead and see those. But we're doing what we can. We want to simplify things. We want to make things better. Team topology has come along, and it's attempted to try and help us reduce the cognitive overload in our teams, right? And that helps. But we've also got AI, of course. AI is here to save the world and help us. And I really do think some of these tools are going to be amazing and going to help us make things better. But recently, I posted on Twitter about burnout. And I was like, why can't we have a conference with a theme that talks about burnout? And I was amazed at the amount of people who responded to this tweet. And then I said, well, let's do something about it. But we're all way too exhausted and tired to actually organize the conference, so we never did. I think as an industry and as a society as well, we're just coming to the edges of burnout. It's been a really tough few years. Is it just me that's dreamed of going to a log cabin in the middle of nowhere, putting a tin foil on my head, and just trying to get away from it all? I find it hilarious in 2014. We were all talking about, yes, we've got to disrupt. Let's disrupt the industries. Let's disrupt Uber. Let's disrupt everything. And now we're like, stop with the disruption. I can't. Today I'm going to share 4 stories. And they're my 4 stories about experiences that I've had in tech leadership. And they're across various different companies. But I'm going to share about, they're not all great, but they're loosely based on my experiences I've had. All right, the first one. I think one of the things that we want to look at when we think of, like, how do we deal with this? How do we help our teams prepare with this cognitive overload? how do we actually, can we prevent our teams? Can we protect our teams from this? And the reality is we know we can't stop what's happening. We know we can't protect our teams from all these changes, but we can prepare them. We can help prepare them, and we can help them work towards making these changes, dealing with these changes in a measured way. David Marquet is the author of Turn the Ship Around. Now, David Marquet was a naval commander, and he worked, as I said, he worked as a naval commander in a nuclear submarine. Now, David, when you think about like a nuclear submarine, I don't know about you, but I think Navy kind of command and control, right? I don't necessarily think of Daniel Pink and autonomy, mastery, and purpose when I think of the Navy. But also, David recognized that it's a nuclear submarine. This is a high-risk situation. He doesn't want a group of sailors sitting there passively waiting to be told what to do. He realized these people needed to be proactive and to be able to see a problem, raise their hand, and do something about it. I think we need that type of mentality as well in our engineering teams. So what David Marquet did is he designed this approach called intent-based leadership, where he said from the lowest sailor to the top commander, they were empowered by using 3 words: I intend to do. And by saying I intend to do, he gave them permission, if they saw a problem, to go about making that change. We need to be permission givers too, just like David Marquet. So what does that look like in an engineering team? What can we do that's practical as tech leaders? Well, I don't know about you, but my experience of working as an engineer is I learn by doing. And it's the same thing for leadership. We want to give our people in our teams opportunities to actually do leadership. It's kind of that simple. And by doing leadership, I mean giving people opportunities. Opportunities to build confidence and also to learn the skill of leadership, because like everything, it's a skill. Now, when I first kind of started thinking about these sorts of things, I decided I would do formal coaching. So every 2 weeks, somebody would come, we'd sit down and we'd discuss and coach about leadership. And whilst this was kind of helpful, I felt there was something missing in the formula. One of the things I realized that I was missing out on was the fact that there wasn't necessarily a lot of motivation to do that. And I realized that what I needed to do was to make the coaching more opportunistic. So rather than having a formal coaching session, if I saw something that was a coaching moment, I went into coaching mode at that point. So for example, if someone came to me and asked me to solve a problem, how do I do this? What do I do about that? Now typically, being an engineer, I love to solve problems and I love to give people help and advice, and I want to go in and help them with that problem. But I realized the reality is that I needed to take a step back. I needed to allow that time for that person to actually come up with the solution themselves. I would ask them, well, what do you think? And if they came up with something that was useful, that I amplified that thing. It's like, well, let's try that one. Let's have a go with that. And in that way, the actual coaching opportunity was much more applicable to what that person was doing. The other thing that I did was I started to delegate a lot more. You know, I think one of my bugbears is strategic thinking, right? So in leadership, if you ever look at a job description, it's like, must have strategic leadership skills, must be a strategic thinker. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. We want our leaders to have strategic thinking. But I believe everybody needs to be a strategic thinker. everybody in our team. We want to coach them and help them to think strategically, maybe not on high-level organizational things, but certainly what's happening in their teams, and make decisions and trade-offs. Which is the best library? What are the implications of choosing this library over that library? And helping people think critically through that. We can help with that. And so I actually now refuse to do formal documentation. And I developed this concept called co-creation, because you have to give everything a name, right? I developed co-creation, where simply I would actually just pair. It's just called pairing, actually. And you would just pair with someone, and I gave that person the opportunity to write the formal documentations. Now, I didn't just leave them on their own. I would actually give extensive feedback. So I'm giving constant feedback and helping them frame their ideas and work through their ideas. The reality is, it probably would have taken me 30 minutes to write a document like that. And this took a lot longer. But here's the opportunity to give someone those deep skills that they could have. And more importantly, I think it's the confidence to actually go ahead and do it themselves next time. So it's also about making it safe to experiment. I remember this one time I was working in a fintech, and I wish this was my idea, but I had this tech lead who came and said, we've got two potential technical solutions here, and we've been deliberating this through for a couple of days, and we really don't know which way to go. We don't have enough information yet to be able to know which solution we should take. And my co-head of engineering said, well, why don't you roll out both? And in that way, he made it safe to experiment for them. And I kind of wish I had thought of that, because it's such a brilliant idea. But, this is just an example of how we can make it safe to experiment for our teams. But I don't think thinking critically through things is only the thing we do as tech leaders. We also need to create spaces where people can thrive. And when I mean thrive, we all want to be respected at work. We all want to feel engaged. Maybe people call it being in the flow. I don't know. But, we want to go to work feeling valued. But what does it look like in practical terms? How do we replicate that value or making people feel that? Well, I can tell you what it's not. It's not kumbaya. And it's not a lot of hand-holding. It's not ping pong tables, it's not Nerf guns, it's not free lunches. Though all those things are kind of cool to have, don't get me wrong. I want to share a story about a time when I was working in a small company, about 50 engineers, and I had this opportunity to work with them to help them improve some of their quality practices. Now, at the time, I was super excited about doing this, because previously I'd been working on this coaching model to help testers become absolutely excellent in their craft. So it's like, how do we help a tester become really good at what they do? And so, but I had done it in isolation. I'd never had the opportunity to work in an environment where I could actually apply this in a real-life context. So here I was, super excited about getting this opportunity. And I went in, and I started working there, and I realized that this was an amazing culture. This was an amazing organization. They were doing XP, pair programming. Every developer who was there would say, how do we test this? And I was in heaven, like, this is so awesome. Job done. But what I didn't realize, and when I started and quickly found out, was there were a group of testers who would sit in this cold, dark corner down the bottom of the corridor. And these poor testers were given software to test 2 or 3 days before a release, and they frantically had to try and test this software before it went out. Now, to be fair to the organization, they knew this wasn't scalable, and they knew they had to do something, which was kind of why they hired me. So I came in, and I went, no, this isn't going to work. We've got to fix this. And we want our testers to be really close to our team so they can understand the thinking behind some of what's happening. They get a mental model of the system that's been built. And they begin to collaborate and pair much closely with the engineers. We want this type of culture. And so without further ado, talking to a couple of other head of engineering, I put all the testers into the XP teams. Job done. And I thought, well, that was easy. But while some of the testers really, really enjoyed working in that context, and they were like, finally, I get an opportunity to kind of work with a team and we can work together and yay, we can figure out, you know, how we're going to do this really well. Most of the testers felt completely overwhelmed and they didn't know what to do. Where do I start? What do I do? The second thing was also the engineering managers were coming to me. We don't know what to do with this tester on our team. What do we do? We're going for coffee. What does the tester do then? But I realized that whilst I had provided opportunity, I hadn't provided safety. And that I needed to, no matter how amazing someone can be in their role, what an amazing craftsperson they are, that actually we need to provide the environment where those people can do great work and they can thrive. And so what I started doing, I took a step back and I realized, okay, I've got to fix this. And I realized my role wasn't just to focus on the testers, but it was to focus on the whole team. You know, brain melt moment. And I realized that I needed to explain what was in my head and to provide people with that understanding, whether they're visuals or whatever, to help them understand where we were going with all of this and why they should be part of it, and to give them the motivation and the understanding to help them to move forward. I started creating visuals. I also started doing whole team training, with the whole team. So I would explain concepts and how things might work and encourage the team to collaboratively get together and solve a problem. And finally, I did lean coffee sections where everyone, the tech engineers, the tech leaders could come and they could ask each other questions and see what was working in the other teams and share ideas and things like that. So this was a big lesson for me. But there's more. Whoops. There's more to come. By now, you might have realized that I kind of enjoy driving change. I love change. I love the opportunity that it offers. There's always something new to learn, and I really enjoy that about working in the engineering space. But I couldn't really understand, especially when I was working in a kind of consultant mode, why some people didn't like change. That was odd. Isn't this a great opportunity? Why are they so resistant to change? Well, I got an opportunity to discover this because what happened was with an organization I was working with, half my team got laid off. And I had no idea this was coming down the path. And I was very, very unhappy about this situation. This was a change I did not like. And I've been reflecting on this change and thinking, well, what is it about this change that was so hard for me to process? I mean, of course, no one likes losing their team, but why was I so, quite frankly, angry about this situation? There was a couple of things. One was that I was not the person driving the change. The change was being put upon me. I know, Gestalt moment, I mean, mind-blindingly insight here. But I think sometimes I wonder as leaders, do we actually sometimes forget to consider the implications of the changes that we're driving? Maybe there's multiple changes that are being pushed onto teams. And I think it's on us to be able to kind of control and manage that a bit so we make sure our teams are not overwhelmed. So I was not the one driving the change, but also, and I think this is probably more, I had no agency in the matter. I was not involved in any part of the process. I had no idea it was coming. No one explained the why to me. No one helped me through that process. And I think time and time again, I've learned this through my engineering career, is that if you don't take people through that, if you don't take people through that process of change, everything becomes so, so much harder. Trust me. Like, if you can, and I understand not every situation allows this, but if you can take people through that process of change and explain what's happening to them, and maybe give them an opportunity to provide input, the outcome, even if it's an outcome that they're not happy with, is far easier to digest. And so helping people through difficult change is part of our role, and we can do something about that. And we can treat people with dignity and respect as we do that. We don't have to treat people in a poor way. I think it's common in tough times, especially with all these layoffs that have been happening, to resort to a kind of command and control type situation. But we don't actually have to do that. We can lean into our values of looking after our people and caring for our people and treating them with respect and dignity. So I kind of think like we have to get better at this, because change is not a project. Change is happening every single day. So this idea of a long sustaining team, a team that you work, how many people work in a team that's one person? The amount of change that's happening, you lose one person in a team and suddenly it's a new team again, right? You get a new engineering manager, it's a new team. And so we have to, I think, accept that this constant change is happening all the time and work with our teams to help them work through that process. And we can do that by helping them through good communication. And I think especially when we're working remotely, understanding that how we communicate and taking care to craft our messages on Slack, and how we do that in a thoughtful way. How is this going to come across to other people? And taking care to write our messages. Even things like spelling and stuff like that make such a big difference. Maybe use ChatGPT or something like that to help. But, I think we get better at how we craft our messages. The other thing I was taught was like, you should totally communicate 10 times when you're working remotely. I've never communicated 10 times on anything. And that's the same thing, right? You should communicate 10 times the same thing. So I do about 3, and that's, I don't know, maybe someone else here can do it better, but I find sort of about 3 works for me. But constant communication about the same thing is really important. I've also found the ADKAR model. I found this a while ago, and I'm a big fan of the ADKAR model, which is basically just takes you through that thinking process of how to handle change. And that's like, explain the why to people, find out what motivates them and help them through by explaining in their terms what's in it for them, basically, and provides the skill and the training to help them be able to handle change. And I think we just got to get better at thinking about things like this. All right, enough about that. I want to get and talk about my motorbike, because that's what you're all here for, right? So we create spaces for people, and that's fantastic, and we try hard to do that. But do we actually create spaces for ourselves? Like, how are we all doing today? How are you dealing with maybe the levels of stress at work, and maybe a bit of anxiety? I think it's okay. Like, it's okay to have those things. We all have them, especially in leadership. It's kind of stressful sometimes. But is it constant? Are you constantly in a high level of stress? Because maybe that's your body of saying something to you that maybe you need to switch something up. Maybe it's time for a bit of self-reflection. Because leaders, I know this is mind-boggling, are human too. We face the same challenges as everyone else. We've got stuff going on outside of work as well. Are we being honest with ourselves? Are we being authentic? So I have to tell this pandemic story because, I just like the story, actually. It's got nothing. But when we were during the pandemic, my partner and I, we decided to learn a hobby because we had nothing else to do. So I thought, well, why don't we just go out and learn how to ride a motorbike? Because, that's what all 55-year-olds do, right? We go out and learn how to ride motorbikes. So we were like, brilliant idea, let's do this. As it turns out, it's totally easy to learn to ride a motorbike and get your Ls, which is your basic license. You turn up, you go onto this kind of toy little figure of 8 type things. You learn how to look left and right and follow all the safety rules. You get given a 125cc motorbike and a helmet, so you don't even have to buy a motorbike. And by the end of the day, pretty much that's it. You get your Ls, and you're off onto the big bad world, into the roads. And so that's what we did. We had a lot of fun on that day. Mentally, I kind of thought, I'm done. I've got my Ls, we've done that, tick, let's go and do something different. What I didn't realize was that my partner totally got the bug, and he went off and bought a motorbike. It's a 300cc Honda. So I was like, oh crap, here we go. And so he started going off and went around the local roads, and I suddenly realized that I was the absolutely biggest scaredy cat ever. I was absolutely petrified. Now, this does not go well with how I see myself. I see myself as this badass kind of person, like who's cool, who's traveled around the world and could do all these amazing things solo. And here I am, completely petrified. Now, I get being completely petrified about ongoing traffic is probably a good thing to do, be on a motorbike. Like, you do want to be really, really cautious about what's going on there. And there are a lot of massively big trucks out there. So I was scared about that, but I was also scared about the potholes on the road. I was also scared about looking really, really stupid, which was probably my biggest fear. And I was scared of making a mistake. And one day I was driving, learning, because my husband said, just go along the local roads, you'll get better, go on, off you go. I'm like, okay. So I went along the local roads, and we had this slight hill incline, and I was trying to do a right-hand turn with a slight hill. Now, I don't know if anyone here rides motorbikes, but this is actually quite difficult to acquire skill, because you've got to have your clutch, your accelerator going, and you also have to have your foot brake going. So you need to have all three and go up the hill and do a right-hand turn. So it's not necessarily that easy. But anyway, as I was getting ready, I could start feeling the motorbike starting to keel. And it was going like this over. And I went, 300cc motorbike, my knee, I know what I'm going to do. And I jumped out of the way. But, one of the big no-nos in motorbike riding is not dropping the motorbike. Look for ads, it's like, never been dropped. So I was absolutely mortified. There's traffic everywhere. And even, well, better or worse, I don't know, you decide. This guy in his ute came out, and he came over, and he was just this massive guy. And he came over, and he sort of picked up the motorbike with his little finger. And he wheeled it out of the way, and I'm sort of meekly kind of following behind him, totally mortified. But he was great. He helped me out. Another time I was riding past 15 teenagers, and I stalled. Well, you know what they did. So honestly, I really wanted to give up. This was just not going the way I expected. But my husband really, really was enjoying himself, and I felt bad. I didn't want to let him down. And he kept on persisting. He said, just go out for a little bit more around the neighborhood. Just keep going. Are you going to go out for a motorbike ride today, Anne-Marie? Okay. So I gradually started getting better. Oh, we got a new motorbike, Yamaha. That helped a little bit. It was different it was easier to get on and off for starters. So that was good. And gradually I could feel my confidence getting better and better and better. until one day I was riding around these bends on the road. Now, if you've ever ridden a motorbike, you know this is the thing, right? Going around bends. And suddenly I realized that I was smiling. I was enjoying myself. And I can't express how important this moment was to me. Like, I went from being so incredibly terrified to actually achieving it. I had done it. And it's given me so much resilience and realization that if I back myself, that I can do these things. And I actually use this at work to remind myself to back myself. And I need to remind myself at work because leadership is hard. Leadership is not necessarily an easy thing. The decisions that we make impact not ourselves, but also a lot of people around us. And if we make a poor decision, that has an impact. I think the other thing is we can be really hard on ourselves about leadership. Like, we have this idea of what leadership is, and it's a very black and white sort of concept of what we think as a leader. But is that really true? Does a leader have to be like that? I'd like to think we need to be kind to ourselves and a lot more allowing of who we can be as leaders. It's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay not to know and say, well, let's just find out. I don't know what's going to happen here. We'll just have to wait and see. It's okay not to sugarcoat things and say, we'll make it better, when you have no idea whether that it is going to be better or not. I think we have to bring our essence into the role of leadership. And we have to learn how to do that. And that's not necessarily an easy thing for us to do. I think we have to be comfortable with our limitations and our own humanity. And I think we get a wonderful authenticity when we do this. We get a wonderful authenticity by backing ourselves. And our leadership style might not be perfect, but it reflects us. And there's a real honesty about that. So just to close out, we've had 4 stories today, 4 experiences. It's not everything about leadership, but these are just my experiences of what I have learned throughout my career. The first one is that everyone is a leader, and let's coach people to be leaders. And we can do that by helping give them confidence and ability, by looking for opportunities, for moments where we can do that. Let's focus on creating spaces where people can thrive. And that's not just necessarily the tooling and the systems, that those are really important, but become advocates to senior leadership about your team. We've got to face change. Change is happening all the time. Let's acknowledge that and allow our teams to include that into their thinking. Let's give them agency, and also think about how much change is happening at the same time in a team, and can you manage that in a considered way. And finally, that maybe it's hard to be a really amazing leader if we're not necessarily authentic with ourselves. That's it. Thank you very much.